All right, so to introduce Marcelo, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. Again, Marcelo, I've known you for a long time, and I can tell you a couple stories that will last a while. But the one that I really, really cherish is his journey to become a CST. This is a guy that did not make it the first time,
Nope.
but worked his rear end to continue to go back in there and get a CST. That is one of the most amazing stories of him not giving up. Even though there were politics involved and all that, he kept going. He kept going. And that's the kind of person this Marcelo is. Never count him down because he will surprise you. Okay. He is one of the best coaches I've ever seen. Okay. Look all around the US and you will not find somebody as dedicated and as committed to that Scrum Agile mindset. Okay, he really believes it, he lives it, he loves it, and I care a lot about him. And I'm hoping to continue to work with him in the future, hopefully closer than he would like. And we've got a lot more to accomplish in this world. Okay, so excited to introduce Marcelo Lopez. It's all yours.
Wow. How do you go forward when you're blushing? I don't know how that, I don't know how that works. Yeah, I seriously, I don't know how that works. So wow, I'm actually blown away that all of you decided to come here tonight on a Wednesday evening, especially since we're in a circumstance where if you wished to, you could mostly not fear stepping outside of your home, unlike this time last year. Okay, because a few weeks ago when we were talking, but I mean the coaches that work with transformation experts and kind of lead up these events, I threw the question, so okay, who got their shots? And everybody had gotten their shots, and I was like, okay, so what happens? And then one of the coaches, I think it was Leon, actually said, what do you mean what happens? And I go, well, it's not like we're gonna stay like this forever. Okay, there has to be something afterwards. And then one of the other coaches said, oh, you mean the new normal? Like, don't use that phrase. I hate that phrase. Okay, but it's in this talk anyways. So I said post-pandemic. Okay, and what happens? And in specific, what happens to all these wonderful people that have been with us for this journey that's been over a year now, where we even had a virtual conference. Okay, whereas the South Florida Agile Association would have a conference every year where we would meet in person. We would literally have hundreds of people. We had a virtual conference. So I set the thinking, okay, so like what can happen? What needs to happen? What happens to this particular, and I chose the Scrum Master. I could have chosen product owner, could have chosen other things, but I chose a Scrum Master. And I said, what happens to this person after the pandemic? Okay, so to kind of talk about what happens or what could happen after quote unquote post-pandemic, I want to take us to Scrum Mastering BP. Okay, in other words, post-pandemic, or actually before the pandemic. So what was Scrum Mastering like before the pandemic? Okay, you'd hear folks talk about let's go co-located. Co-located teams are higher performing, right? Have you guys heard of that? That high performing teams are better when they're co-located. Okay. Right. People may have had a work from home rotation schedule, but yeah, most events were in person, right? Okay. And you had both physical and electronic workboards like Jira and stuff like that. Right. And a lot of your collaboration, a lot of the stuff that you were working with your teams, or some of you that are coaches, you'd use flip charts and post-it notes, right? Okay, let's see a show of hands, some reactions. I want to make sure you're awake. Okay, how many folks were working in modes like this before pandemic? Working co-located teams, working with both physical codes, absolutely. A lot of you guys, and everybody had a case of post-it notes. Everybody, okay? Everybody had a post-it notes. And when you interacted with people, you talk to them one-on-one, okay? Or you talk to them face-to-face as a team, okay? or if you had multiple teams, okay, you would be using multiple senses, right? Not just eyesight, not just your hearing, you know, maybe touching, not tasting. People don't like when they get tasted. Okay. People get kind of touchy about that. They don't like to get tasted. All right. But you'd be using multiple senses, right? All right. So, okay. I want to hear from you guys for a minute before we keep going. What are some of your, I remember before when we used to blank. So what were some of the before pandemic things that you guys would do when you were working with your teams? What were some things that you, for example, you miss before pandemic? What were some things? I want to hear from some of you. Go ahead and unmute yourselves.
Having a daily stand-up with people in the room, retros, some of the ceremonies with people sitting down, bringing food to work, you know, before the retro and all that. Miss all that.
I love it. I knew you were going to say the food, Godwin. All the standing up, sitting down, that's nothing. The food.
The food, yes,
that was the thing. Okay, who's bringing the donuts? Who's bringing the coffee? Now, none of that. Okay, none of that, right? Yeah. Anybody else before we keep moving? Anybody else? Just out of curiosity.
When I was at Next Energy, it was always a battle to find a meeting room to do your stand-ups and to do your retros and stuff like that. I mean, it was painful. Now I don't have that problem, you know.
Yeah, now you don't have that problem. So some stuff was good. Okay, make sure you knew that somebody was going to be feeding you on site. Okay, now some not so good, having to fight for conference rooms and stuff like that. Yeah. So we all have those stories. Okay, so this was before pandemic. Things were, they were challenging, but we had it good as Scrum Masters. Okay, and then what happened? You guys know what happened, right?
Biohazard.
Yeah, biohazard. Yeah, the pandemic. So let's talk about what the Scrum Master's life was DP or during pandemic. Okay, all of a sudden everybody gets thrown into Zoom or team meetings for everything, except the bio breaks. We don't want to know when you're going on a bio break, Godwin. You don't need to take the Zoom camera when you're going on a bio break. We don't need that. Okay. Yeah. And what I like to call Jira rules. Godzilla takes over. Okay. Or Azure DevOps or PlanView or whatnot. Okay. Completely electronic for all workflow management. Okay. Can't play around with sticky notes anymore. Why? Because we're having to use Miro and Mural and stuff like that for shared collaboration. Okay. And coaching was limited to just 2 senses most of the time. Okay. Your eyesight and your hearing. Okay. Unless people didn't turn on their video like we're having right now. So I have to guess that people aren't falling asleep during this call. Why? Because I can only hear them if they're talking. Okay. I can't really see them, but they don't have their video on. Okay. Okay. So again, I want to hear from you guys. What kind of adaptations did you guys have to employ when you guys switched to during pandemic mode? Okay. What were some sort of things that you didn't expect that you needed to do that you now had to rely on during pandemic? Somebody. Okay, now everybody's gone afraid.
Google meetings.
Please, Brianna.
It didn't really change. So a lot of it's, and the reason I say this culture was eating us for lunch. We were dictated on how we were going to work, and a lot of all it did, instead of all coming to the office, do the exact same activities. I mean, we were already distributed teams as it was. It reinforced some processes that were really good and made them, heightened the ones that were really good, and really showed the troughs that were ones really needed to improve. So it didn't really change a lot. It just accelerated good practices and highlighted more of the bad practices.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Brianna. So it accentuated the positive and blew up the negative. I love it. Fantastic. Godwin, were you gonna share something?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Want to leave the door open for anybody else? One more person. Anybody want to share some other adaptations that they had to employ?
Yes, stand up meeting, or not the stand up, but the water cooler meetings went away.
I
Oh,
was
they just went to chat.
Even then, they didn't go, it's not the same.
exactly. I was hoping somebody would say that. All those impromptu conversations, all those impromptu moments that Scrum Masters could have, okay, to either help their team members or just listen, or just give the person the space, went away simply because of the difference of not being in physical presence with that. Okay, I share with you that more than a handful of team members of folks that I work with in teams that I coach, okay, actually said I wasn't looking at the gallery, so I don't know who said that. I think it was William, and correct me if I'm wrong, okay, but several people came to me during this and said that to me. I miss being able to talk one-on-one with someone. I miss being able to just have a conversation about what's going on in the team with someone impromptu. Okay, so while we were working in person, we may not have realized some of the benefits of actually being able to be in person with our teammates. So thank you very much for sharing that, the two of you, Bran and William. Thank you so much. Yes, Godwin.
We actually used to golf on Fridays.
Oh, wow.
Just around the office, and we keep scores, and every 3 weeks we find who is the winner and all that. And I think now that you're talking about it, kind of miss that.
I love it. In other words, you guys lost the ability to do those impromptu team bonding activities.
Yeah, and ping
Absolutely.
pong. I miss playing ping pong.
Yeah.
Ping pong was big in our building. One thing that I really miss, Marcelo, is whenever the customer care professionals had a big issue, the support team would send me down to the floor, and I would spend a few hours with them side by side and really walk around to other team members within that team and either help them fix things or show them things or really get into the usability and figure out their pain points. Sometimes these were pretty complex issues, so it's not as easy when you're virtual and doing Zoom or, in our case, WebEx, to have those kinds of conversations where everybody is joining in from around them and saying, hey, I also have this issue, come look at my machine, and adding to the conversation. So we lost that capability of working with a group of CCPs, folks that were using our tools.
Wow, that's really deep. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Lily. That's fantastic. And the funny part is that it started to sink in after a while, right? After a while, this just kind of felt like, well, this is just what it is, okay. And I confess that I didn't start thinking about this early enough, and I wish I had started thinking about this earlier, okay, because after almost a year of working this way, all of a sudden something happened, early mid 2021. Does somebody remember what that was? Just out of curiosity, anybody remember what that was? The big thing?
The vaccine?
Finally, yeah. Finally, vaccines were announced, okay? And as of this month, okay, I'm speaking strictly for the United States. So for those of you that are visiting us from another country, I'm sorry, these statistics don't account for you in them. But in the United States, we had a mid 60% overall population that had one dose. And with regards to adults, okay, over 70% of US adults, okay, have had a full vaccination course. Okay, obviously that mid 60% includes children, teenagers, and so on and so forth. So this came about, and so question for those of you that had your vaccine, okay, when did you think you were actually going to go back into office? When did it strike anybody that, well, you know what, we might actually start returning back to the office? I'm just curious. I'm going to throw that out there.
Are you asking in regards to even if you have had that knowledge of you going back to the office?
Yeah. When did it occur to you? And I'm thinking just from the time the vaccines were available, when did it hit you or strike you that, you know, we might actually have to go back to the office sometime? When did that realization hit anybody?
I think it came about mid-June when you start hearing some of those statistics. You kind of feel like, oh God, it's getting close to that, not being normal, but just getting close. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I guess when they start doing surveys, hey, do you guys want to go back to the office, or are you happy from working from home?
Yeah. For me, it hit me when my boss started asking me the question of, okay, so all these teams you're coaching, how would they feel about returning to the office? And then the very next week, our other stakeholder, who Rick knows, asked me the exact same question. I'm gonna say, okay, these C-levels have something up their sleeve, probably having to do with returning to office. Okay. So for me, that happened sometime probably back in March. Okay. It started to really strike back to me. So I started thinking about, okay, at some point, okay, we're going to actually come to Scrum Master's PEP, which is, and no, I know there are some of you that are out there thinking, oh, Marcella said something funny. Come on, get real. Something's not right here, okay? Because the fact is, what's returning to office is not really returning to office, okay? I don't know if you guys have realized this, okay? But people are pushing back. People are saying, we don't want to go back to the office. We're perfectly comfortable where we are, and in some ways, we're more productive. Some people are saying that. Other people are saying exactly the opposite. I can't wait to get back to return to the office. Okay. I think that probably I'd say that what I found is a breakdown, at least with the people that I'm working with, is it breaks down to around 70-30. 70 are perfectly happy never to have to go back into the office, and 30% can't wait for the front door to be open. Okay. The thing is this, a high percentage of IT teams have transitioned from either full remote or heavily remote work model. Is anybody else experiencing this? Is anybody else experiencing that? Oh, thank you, Brianna. I appreciate that. Okay. Because with the folks that I'm working with, 99% of the teams are staying remote. Only some people are cycling back into the office, and that is at least for the foreseeable future, on a voluntary basis. Okay? Another challenge is when team happiness doesn't really mean satisfaction. Okay. And what I mean by that is burnout isn't just a metaphor anymore, right? You could sit here and say, oh man, you're going to burn out. Why? Because I work 60 hours a week. Doesn't have to do with the amount of hours you're working a week anymore. Okay. Because even when people are working in the office, if you had to drive into the office, and I don't know about you guys, but me, I actually look forward to my drive home because I was able to decompress. I was able to put on some music, like the music that I was playing at the intro, listen to a little bit of Bee Gees, a little bit of Red Hot Chili Peppers, a little bit of, it depended. But I enjoyed, there you go, Joe. I enjoyed that time to decompress going back home before I would get home, okay? But now the subject of burnout isn't just a metaphor. It's something that people are actually having to deal with, okay? Unfortunately, I didn't put it in here, but there's actually statistics floating around on the increase in alcoholism in people. I'm telling you, the people that are making money are the liquor stores out of this pandemic. They're making money hand over fist, okay? So burnout isn't just a metaphor, okay? And then another thing is People are just plain out valuing different things now. Our team members place a different value on different things now than they did pre-pandemic, okay? And the differential in generations is even more pronounced, okay? Can't be arguing about millennials wanting to be able to transition from jobs more readily. Why? Because the folks my generation are even saying, hey, wait a minute, hang on a second. I've been given this company 25 years, 30 years of my life, and what do I really have to show for it? Okay? So let's look at what some of these after effects of post-pandemic. Okay, dun 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 dun, like under pressure. Okay, longer hours, people struggling to disconnect. Okay, they're juggling more. Okay, why? Because organizations haven't learned, quote unquote, their lessons from having people able to connect to the work practically 24/7. Okay, just a show of hands really quickly, use your reactions or throw up your hands. How many folks were actually connecting into work during the pandemic before 9 o'clock in the morning? Be honest. 9 o'clock in the morning, before 9 o'clock. I'm seeing a few hands going up there. Fantastic. Thank you for that honesty. Now, leave your hands up or keep them raised if you were connected after 5 p.m. Wow, now a slew of hands went up for people connecting after staying connected after 5 p.m. That's fantastic. You know what that's led to? All that is led to is to employee churn, or what the Bureau of Labor calls the great employee turnover. What does that look like? A 57% overall turnover in employment. I mean, I'm talking about across all sectors, not just IT, okay? 29% of that is involuntary. Companies like downsizing, okay? All right, and here's the one that blows me away. Ready for this? 25% voluntary. People are forcibly choosing to seek alternative employment than what they had, even if their employer did not downsize during the pandemic. During the pandemic. Okay? During the pandemic. Okay? And so here's where this comes home to me. Okay? What's a Scrum Master to do? Well, let's apply Scrum to the problem. Okay? Because if you think all this stuff that I put in the last slides are not a Scrum Master's problem, okay, then we don't understand the role of the Scrum Master. Okay? Remember, the role of the Scrum Master is there to help the team become more high performing, caring about the health of the team, right? So here are some things, okay, that I've put into place and I want to share with you to help the Scrum Master apply Scrum to the problem, okay? And so here I'm quoting the Declaration of the Independence and the Constitution. We the people, in order to, what do I mean? Okay, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were basically very formal working agreements, okay? So Scrum Masters, if you have working agreements between your team members, between teams, between managers, between your teams and your stakeholders, time to revisit those working agreements. Time to revisit those working agreements. If you don't have them, time to put some working agreements in place. Okay? Put some working agreements in place. Okay? And it's a very simple metaphor. I didn't put it in the slide, I probably should have, but it's very simple. There's 4 categories. Okay? What's cool? What's acceptable as an interaction between you and I? What's not cool? What is not acceptable behavior or interaction between you and I? Okay? What should we discuss and then decide? What can we not agree on right now, but at least we recognize that at some point, if this becomes an issue, we should really have a conversation and work through it and come to a formal agreement, whether we're okay or not okay with it. Okay. And then last but not least, okay, the thing that puts a bite into any working agreement, consequences. In other words, an understanding between yourself and myself of, if I break or you break this agreement, what happens? Some consequence that happens as a result of breaking this working agreement, okay? And here's why this is so important, folks, because it's essential to create a safe working environment for your teams. It's essential to create a safe working environment for your team. So if we have them, post-pandemic folks, time to review them, okay? If we don't have them, time to put some in place. Next, make things visible, okay? And what do I mean by that? Okay, people cannot overcome what they can't see. So if things are being an impediment, if things are being an issue to your team, between your team members, between your managers, between your stakeholders, as a Scrum Master, work diligently to make them clear and accessible to the team so that they can talk about it, okay? And what I mean by that is, I like to use metaphors a lot. If you know me already, you know that I like to use metaphors a lot, okay? What I mean by make it visible is like the song from Martha and the Vandellas, nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide. You want to make the challenges that your team members and your teams are facing like that. Give them nowhere to run to, nowhere to hide, okay? Because they cannot overcome what they cannot see, okay? And then measure twice, cut once, okay? What do I mean by that, okay? Focus on your team goals and then focus them again, okay? In other words, if your teams have goals, okay, work more diligently to make sure that they are focusing on goals, okay, and the outcomes those goals support, okay? Don't let them get stuck into the output problem or the output churn, okay? Help them focus on what matters, okay? It's not a matter of how much, it's a matter of how good, okay? So these are some thoughts and some recommendations, okay? And how can you help them focus on it? Ask them questions and say, hey, what does our best X look like? What about that X is what matters, okay? And then what could we do to help that happen, okay? Whatever that X is, whether it's something positive or negative. For example, if you want to accentuate some things that your teams are doing well, how could we be better? I'm going to use Brianna as an example, okay? What could we be doing better? What does that best X look like? Or, okay, how could we beat that thing that keeps dogging us that we can't seem to overcome? What could we do to overcome that? Okay, but focus them on positive and removing negative. Okay, it helps them bridge the difference from when they could just sit and talk about it, for example, at the cooler, and a lot of solutions would come up there. Now they need a little bit extra help from their Scrum Master to help them focus on these sorts of things, right? And so kind of sort of last but not least is, what sort of adaptations have you guys thought of applying now that I'm talked a little bit about, post-pandemic, what this could look like, what have you guys thought of any adaptations that you could further apply post-pandemic, okay? Or what have you maybe already applied, okay? And I thought maybe if we had time, and I haven't honestly looked at the clock, so I don't know if we have time, I created a jam board in case you guys would like to discuss that. Is that something you guys would like to do? Or would you prefer to just kind of have an open conversation about some of this? I'm going to open the floor back for you guys.
But Marcelo, it's jam.
I'm sorry, what was that, Lily? I only heard part of that.
So let's do it. Let's go jam.
Let's do it. Let's dig in. All right, fantastic. So Nelu, if you would be so kind, and I'm going to switch us to the Jamboard. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
Nelu has that link. So if you would be so kind as to put it in the chat so folks could put that in there. Let's
Yes,
jump
I
on that.
just
Let's jump
I
on-
just put it on the chat.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So this was the jam board for the during COVID, the first one, the first page. What were some practices you had to modify because of COVID, and how well did those work out? Okay. So, but if you want, why don't we actually let's actually go into actually, you know what? Let's go to page 3 if you guys don't mind. Yeah. Let's just do it. Let's make it simpler. Yeah. What do you think you may have to adapt? Okay, let's see when the keyboard comes back. I may have to adapt post-pandemic. I'm curious. Okay, so there's one question. How do you think you'll know it's working? So there are some questions to kind of provoke a conversation. Let's spend just a few minutes looking at these two. So if you don't mind coming to page 3. Page 3. Where I am. And I'll pop in the link in there as well. If you come on down to page 3, what do you think you may have to adapt post-pandemic? I've shared with you some of the things that I've been doing, and I'm more than happy to discuss about how it's going for me or how I think it's going to work. Yeah, so I invite you to share your ideas. Awesome. Fantastic. Fantastic. Very cool. Okay, so we may have to be dealing with more remote team members. Some of us are looking forward to bring back some more face-to-face interactions. Oh, the whole hybridicity thing. Okay. Excellent. Oh, using more powerful questions. Fantastic. Oh, that's interesting. Having to set some working hours. Fantastic. Okay. And be direct with questions. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, there's quite a few of you on here. Want to hear more what some folks think. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. I see some more familiar faces that came a little bit later. That's okay. They were fashionably late. That's wonderful. We're glad they're here. Dana, thank you. Alfredo, thank you for joining us. I'm using the moment to kind of scroll through the gallery so I see who joined. So I want to thank you guys for coming that did a little bit later. Wonderful. Fantastic. Okay, success with the remote work. If nobody realized I'm full remote, I'm still effective. Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah. Added virtual happy hours for team building and sharing challenges. Looking for new opportunities outside the organization. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Fantastic. Yeah. So I want to kind of pose this next this next thought experiment for you guys. Okay. How will you know that they're working? Okay. I see some questions. around this, but how do you know they're working? I'm just curious. How will you know that they're working? Okay, and I'll give you my example. For example, okay, we've gone through a round of reviewing and revising and updating some working agreements with some of the teams. Okay, some of those updates involved, as you might have noticed in the slide, I mentioned in one of the slides, I mentioned inter-team and then inter-managers. Okay, and what I mean by that is that some teams don't report, in other words, the people on the team don't report to the same manager. Okay, so imagine if you've got a team, it's a Scrum team, let's say, or an Agile team, and they're cross-functional, all right? But these two people report to different manager than these two people, yeah? Okay, and this manager, okay, has a particular habit of being able to go into their direct reports and saying, I'm your manager, okay, and I need you to blank. Even though they had understood that this is an Agile team and this team has work that comes to them with a product owner, with a backlog, the whole shooting match, right? But then we've got this manager that comes in and, hey, I need you to go work on that, blah, blah. Okay, doesn't sound like a fun circumstance, right? It's going to be challenging for that team, right? So the adaptation that we made is including the manager as part of creating the working agreement for the team. Okay, in other words, if this manager needs some support for something, the rules of the road, okay, are agreed to by those involved. In other words, we help the manager recognize the impact of the team, okay, by sharing what the impact of the team might be, and helping that manager, okay, be more of a leader than a manager by including them in the team's working agreement. What do you think of my idea? I'm curious to hear. What do you guys think of my idea? Is that a thumbs up, Joe? Okay, I appreciate that vote of confidence. Anybody else? Anybody have any questions about
I have a
that
question.
experiment? Go ahead, Godwin.
So how do you approach that, or how do you start that conversation?
You start that conversation by applying one of the concepts that I mentioned earlier in the slides. Okay, specifically, oops, sorry, resume the share. Specifically by, and I'm going to change it in color. I haven't highlighted it yet. Let me draw it. By applying it here. Making the work that the team does clear and accessible to that manager, okay? And show them the impacts of trying to disrupt the team. Make them aware of the team's performance and the impact of their behavior to the team. And say, if you're okay with this, that's fine, but when you behave this particular way, the team documents what it does, the team makes clear what happens to it, and because it makes clear what happens to it, disruption, turbulence that you throw into it, okay, is going to be made clear. So if the team's moving in a particular direction and they're moving at a pretty reasonable clip, and you add some turbulence, it's going to cause some disruption to the team. We have no recourse but to make it clear. And so when stakeholders ask questions, hey, how come that? I thought you guys were going to deliver that, blah, 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 blah. I thought that was part of your goal. Well, we uncovered that while we were moving this direction, we had some disruption. Okay. And then questions get asked. Are we being mean? Are we being vengeful? Are we being hurtful? No, we're being transparent. Okay. And the point is to do it equally, to do it without prejudice of any kind whatsoever, which is why we didn't just include one manager, we included both. We included both managers in that conversation so that if either, okay, undertook that. Why? Because I'll tell you right now, part of the issue was that manager A of these two people over here, was not really thrilled when manager B over here would take one of their team members off for half a day to go work on some pet thing. So it wasn't just a cause for pain and suffering for the team. It was a pain and suffering for the manager as well. They didn't like that. They did not appreciate that. And so our experiment to solve that was bring everybody into the working agreement. Make everybody a party to we the people in order to blank. Does that make sense? Cool. So that was my experiment. It's still running. I'm not going to say it's perfect, okay? But it seems to be holding for right now. It seems to be holding for right now. So I'm going to switch back to the jam because wow, you guys have added some serious jam stuff in there. Fantastic. Does anybody want to share about something having to do with some adaptation that they've put in place post-pandemic and maybe why they felt they needed to do it and what they were trying or looking to accomplish? Anybody?
Sure, happy to share. So something that was actually pre-pandemic, but it was stemmed from a crisis. In retrospectives, and we would do them more frequently than every 2 weeks. We had to consistently do them more frequently. I made everybody, as a Scrum Master, I made everybody on the team praise someone on the team to remind them to be empathetic because we're not in this alone. And just because you don't interact as frequently or face-to-face with other teams does not mean we get to go beat up on other teams when we're having bad days, right? Now, I've had to drive this harder during the pandemic because as moods have, increased, or volatility has gone up, it's been difficult to handle at times. So especially after tough conversations or something didn't go well, making sure that we recognize, and I get a lot of pushback because people get upset about this, is you still have to thank someone and you have to thank another team, and you can't say guys or the team. You actually have to specifically call out an individual by name, and by reinforcing that behavior, it makes sure it's a good way of making sure that team members recognize that someone's here to make you successful as well. We have bad days and we're having consistently a lot of bad days. You still have to recognize someone. We still have jobs and you're still winning, right, in a pandemic, and be mindful of that we don't always talk about bad days we have. And so be thankful to someone else. And if you notice it's like there's a lot of toxicity, do it consistently. Build it into either your stand-ups, retrospectives, sprint reviews, other events or ceremonies you do, meetings of any kind. Get started off, even if it's like you have to think of someone, someone's going to recognize a good behavior that has come out of us being remote.
I love it. Because you reminded me that I forgot to put something on this deck. And that is another adaptation, because one of the things that we built in for some of the teams is kudo wall. A kudo wall in the Confluence where people could register kudos to people that did things for them during the sprint. And so we would capture that as part of the retrospective, but they were accumulating them during the sprint, for example. And one of the things that's tossed around, now that you made me think about this, Brianna, is a kudo bank, which is you earn kudo points. Sorry, Godwin, they're not earning Godwin coin. They're earning kudo points, and after many,
can we do something about that?
We could do something about that, but we have to turn them into actionable currency, and we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, all right, Cool.
So what we did is that with one of the teams is established a kudo points where so many kudo points earn you a coffee, or so many kudo points, earn you a lunch and stuff like that. And we're still discussing how we're going to monetize this kudos thing, but those are ideas that are being brandished about to help teams cohese despite the distance. Awesome.
I like it.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share something about something that they've had to adapt, quote unquote, post pandemic or as we're transitioning in the pandemic? Anybody else?
I'll share.
Hey, oh, go ahead.
So, Brianna, I'm glad you brought that up because we naturally, during the pandemic, I think, developed a lot more empathy towards one another, and definitely increased the thank yous to one another, and just the amount of support that we gave one another, because we were all feeling, upset and vulnerable, not just vulnerable at work, because there were layoffs going on, but vulnerable in our personal lives. People around us were getting sick, we were losing family members, colleagues. So, the thank yous just kind of snowballed, and the amount of empathy that we had for one another and how we just lifted each other up just snowballed during this period. It was a really beautiful thing to see.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Lily. Appreciate that very much. And I think, Dana, you were going to share something with us?
Yes, I was going to say, I'm glad she brought that up as well. I've always captured, kudos on a board as practice, pre-COVID. But one of the tweaks that was done post-COVID that we've adapted, which will continue to be an adaptation for the team, is to take those kudos outside of retro and actually do something about it. So at my firm, we have this recognition tool. So we're able to now take the kudos, apply them inside of an e-card or e-award, and allow, people sprint over sprint to get something outside of just a voice or a text message or email, right? You're actually given something tangible in the terms of a little recognition card. Another point I wanted to adapt it because of pre-COVID, I know people have been multitasking with kids at home, trying to just balance the work and life. I've noticed that note-taking increased for me, but also just repeating the same information more than once, right? So when you're in person, you're able to just nudge someone, but when you're not in person, you don't know if you missed something or not. And so just keeping up with different tasks on the task board, just as a reminder to people. I didn't used to do that before, but now taking a task issue in Jira, for example, and creating a reminder for things that people don't necessarily give thought to, sprint over sprint was definitely needed. So whether or not I take that into post-COVID, when people get back together in the office, that's yet to be decided, but wanted to throw that in as well.
Wow, Dana, thank you so much for that. If I can ask you to, when you guys make a decision or take some action, if you wouldn't mind coming back and actually sharing an outcome or some takeaways from what you guys decide to do ultimately, let us know. How did it go?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah, some of us would actually like to know how that actually.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So I want to thank you guys for sharing all this stuff. By the way, that link, the link to this Jamboard is going to stay there. You're more than welcome to access it and keep it. I'm not going to delete it after this, so it's more than welcome to continue to use it after this, and maybe refer to it and get any insights you might get from it. But there's one person or one entity that we've forgotten, because we've talked about teams, we've talked about managers, we've talked about stakeholders and product owners. Can anybody tell me who we might have forgotten? I mean, there's some space that I'm just feeling is kind of blank. Anybody?
The customer?
I don't know. I think maybe we've forgotten somebody. Yeah. We've
Us.
forgotten the Scrum
Ourselves?
Master themselves.
Ourselves, yeah.
Right. Remember, like kind of like you remember that I like metaphors. This is kind of like Smokey the Bear. So only you can prevent forest fires. Well, remember, only you can really Scrum Master you. And what I mean by that is, okay, you know, if a Scrum Master looks like this in a high performance team, because the team's on it, they are on it. Okay, way you're going to get there and survive is make it count. You know, whatever you do, whatever you try to apply to help the team become a better team, make it count. Stay alert. Use as many senses as you're able. Remember, people do not like to be tasted. Leave your sense of taste for lunch. Okay. Always ask questions. Okay. Get comfortable with asking questions, open-ended questions, powerful questions. Just as always, ask questions. Okay. And then, even more so, is be more, but manage your energy. In other words, a dead Scrum Master is not a good Scrum Master.
No.
Okay. A dead Scrum Master is not a good Scrum Master. So manage your energy. Be more, but manage your energy. Okay? And honestly, with that, that's it.
Does that mean more coffee?
Yeah.
Maybe, but one thing I know that it meant for me is it meant more beer, because I gained weight during the pandemic. So, but manage your energy, folks. Okay. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. I leave the door open for any Q&A that you guys have after this. Thank you so much for being so gracious and sticking with me for all this time. I hope some of this proved useful to you and makes a little bit better the world that we live in. Thank you so much.